Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I chat with Kristin Kenney. She's a powerhouse when it comes to coaching some of the top business leaders around the world. But before that, she comes from humbling backgrounds, grew up with her own struggles and challenges, really kind of bettered herself and overcame a lot of self-doubt and a lot of challenges in general to be where she is today, which is, advising these really successful individuals around the US, how to help them be at their best game. So she shared a lot of strategies around some of the common challenges that these leaders have, and also how does she herself stay on top of her game, and what does she do daily in terms of practices and routines. So she's very strategic in the way she runs her company, very strategic in the way she advises her clients and coaches them, and just very dedicated. And I've seen this firsthand, super dedicated to the work that she does. And no wonder she's so successful and fulfilled by the mission that she's, out there to do. She really brings in some interesting, again, reminders for us about how to be at our top game. So listen in. As always, if you like this episode, please make sure you subscribe. It really helps with the reach. Like the episode, share, and I'll see you for the next one. Kristin, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to chat with you today. Of course, as always, Kamina is, she is a network, the best networker I think there is, and she always introduces me to awesome people. So it's always great that we kind of get a chance to meet through Kamina and through UMSV, and it's just been like I met so many just amazing people. So I'm really, really excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited. I'm happy for the introduction too. So excited for everything we're going to talk about today.
Yes, there's a lot to cover. So we will do our best, because I think you've done so many amazing things, and you're known as the secret weapon for many leaders. So, and I want to talk about, like, how did you get there? But tell me your career story. Like, how do you become a person who's like, that is my secret weapon as a leader?
Well, first of all, those are not my words. Those are the words of my clients. So we did pop that in there, and it's an honor to be thought of that way. But in terms of my career, the calling found me. I grew up living all around the world, and my father was in military intelligence and later in banking. And I think his way of thinking just became very much ingrained in me, and I'm very grateful for that. So my father is quite logical and strategic. My mother is an accomplished therapist. And so growing up in that world, the literal marriage of those two worlds helped form the way I think. And in terms of the career, when I graduated from university, the first role I had out of university was to work at conferences that were dealing with wealth management, asset management, trust and estate matters. And I thought, this is a little dry, but it's a paycheck. And I was so excited to have a job right out of college where, it was a tough time. But one thing I learned was that the people who were going to these conferences operated completely on trust. And in my little role, I was just getting coffee and making sure that the room was set up for these conferences. But I found myself in rooms with some of the most ultra high net worth billionaires and centimillionaires globally who were coming to these conferences, which were very small and curated, and in need of solutions, crisis solutions. For example, addicts in the family, wealth transfer, authenticating art, divorces, marriages, so many things that were just a normal part of human and family life that I grew up knowing about from my parents and seeing my parents deliver solutions. And I saw that these families also needed solutions, and that always stuck with me. So that's kind of helped put me in this direction. I'm really grateful. It's a very, very cool thing to be doing.
Yeah, very cool. So how did you get to where you are today, where you're actually, kind of you're the leader of your company, right? You started this thing. So what was that like? When were you like, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to just, do this full on, so how did you get to, I think it takes a lot of courage. So I'm always curious, like, was there like a pivotal moment? You're like, this is the time, I'm going to do this now.
Oh, wow. I wish there was a time. And during the course of my career, I worked in marketing strategy, commerce, analyzing metrics for luxury brands and other smaller, larger companies. I always admired people who were entrepreneurial, and I always thought that's not for me. That's not the role that I would want to take. But what happened was that people would come to me to do coaching, and I always had it kind of off on the side as a hobby. I never thought to turn it into a full business. But prior to COVID, actually, I know so many people started their businesses during COVID. Prior to COVID, there was a rush. I think sometimes we forget it. I know I forget that the world was rapidly changing just prior to when the pandemic hit. There was so much movement in the financial markets, so many family changes in the larger families of billionaires and centimillionaires. Things were really changing at a rapid pace. So I started getting a rush of new clients. And so by the time that COVID hit, we chose to LLC the company. I by default became the founder of the company, the CEO. And then over the last few years, we've scaled, and it's a real business. I can't believe it myself, but I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish for other people, to advocate for people being well.
Mhm. And so one of the things that you work with your clients of is around just kind of having difficult conversations. And I think that is so interesting because this is one of the, not only do leaders struggle with that, but I hear this as the top request from even young professionals that I work with. It's like the top request, like, hey, what do you guys want to know more about, like when it comes to soft skills? And it's like, how do I have a difficult conversation? So do you have any kind of go-to strategies that can be applicable for everybody? Is there differences between having a difficult conversation as a leader versus as a young professional? Like, I don't know, I'm just, is there one?
That last question is really compelling. I don't know that there is a difference. I think a difficult conversation is a difficult conversation. And I think a good place to start is why. Like, what are you, I think something we forget is, what are you hoping the outcome to be? Not just to have the difficult conversation, but be strategic. What do you want the outcome to be? So
Mm,
I find that whether I'm working pro bono, whether I'm working as a mentor with someone younger, or whether I'm working with a well-established leader at the C-level executive, we all have to think the same way. What is the outcome? What is the desired outcome? Right. So if the desired outcome is A, then what are the steps to get there? And that requires listening, I think. So to listen and start asking questions. One of the things I teach everyone I work with is consider the questions. What are the right questions to lead you to goal A? So I would be curious, like, what is an example that you have from the maybe the students or people younger in the workforce? What is maybe an example of what you hear, like an outcome that they desire?
hmm. I mean, I'm in the career development space, right? So a lot of the challenges that they, ask about is, I don't know, for example, let's say they are maybe let's say a person's not performing in the workplace, right? And I think that's a difficult conversation for not only the leader, the manager in that position, but also the individual on the other side. I think for the manager, it's like if you're a new manager, and a lot of these young professionals are new managers, like this is the first time they have to give somebody not just positive feedback, but like actually negative feedback. And then on the flip side, how are you able to have that difficult conversation and not get offended and defensive? So whichever way you want to take. This is the biggest one I've definitely seen.
That's a great example. And that's a great example where we might, you or I or us together, ask the subject, what do you want the outcome to be? Because the difficult conversation is necessary, but necessary for what? So where do you see this going? So if it's
Mm,
managing someone else and there needs to be a course correction, what is the outcome? Is it to be on a performance plan? Is it to manage the person out? Is to maybe guide them in the direction of another department or somewhere where they can be maybe use their skills in another arena in the same company, what's the outcome? And I find even with some of the leaders I work with, they haven't thought about that. They just know that this person is problematic within the company. But what we do is, and I'm sure you do this as well, our goal is to create a solution. So what's the best solution for everyone? What is it you want to achieve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think it's a lot of also learning how to build relationships, and I think the ability to build relationships can probably prevent the discomfort in having some of those conversations, right? Like at least minimize the discomfort. And to that point, you've built relationships not only in just regular workplaces, but in very kind of high profile circles and those sort of things. So how do you build relationships? How do you position yourself for career growth in organizations? What has been like your secret weapon to go to if there is one?
I think I've seen a lot of ways that this can be successful, but for career growth, it goes back to actually the last thing that we were just talking about. What's your desired outcome? So I find sometimes, even if I'm working with somebody who's already achieved, maybe they're the founder of a company or the founder of 5 companies, or they're a C-level at a big publicly traded company, or somebody just starting out in their career. I've worked with people who are 22, 25, 32, 35. Those ages are really exciting times of big transition. One of the things I find people don't think about is where they actually want to go. And sometimes we don't think big enough. Sometimes we think about, well, I'm limited with this, or I'm limited with that, or I only know these people, or I went to this school for undergrad. Maybe I didn't go to an Ivy, and maybe I feel like my choices are limited. I ask people to think about what they want to achieve. So when you know where you want to go, then you have something to track toward. One thing that most people do that we find is that they are not aiming at anything in particular.
Mm.
And it's better to aim, maybe not as skillfully, but aim at something than aim at nothing. So one thing I find is when I'm working with individuals is we see that a lot of people think that their career is on a certain trajectory, but if they haven't aimed at what it is that they want, they're not going to get there. So when I have someone who knows, for example, okay, I'm working at X company, but I am looking to be a founder, and this is the solution that I'm looking to bring into the world, then we can start working on their business plan, their lean canvas for their business plan, start to flesh out where they want to go and start to test this out and start to see whether their idea is viable. But when they're not even thinking, when an individual isn't even thinking about what they want to achieve, where they want to go, it's tough to make something happen. So that would be, I would say, the first step. Really
Mm.
dream, really dream big. Where do you want to go?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is that something I've realized about myself a few years back, and now I'm like, I check myself, is it's scary sometimes to dream big. I think the fear around dreaming big is like, I think more people are afraid of it actually happening. And that was me. I was like, oh my God, like, but like, I think I'm more afraid of the thing going right than I am of the failure of the thing. Like, and most people are afraid of failure, which is why a lot of people, I think, just kind of hold back because when in this, we want to be in our comfort zone. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. And I think it's a societal problem we have. I think we want to feel comfortable. We don't want to step out of that comfort zone. And I think that mindset keeps you, again, I've been there as well. And I was forced to think outside of that mindset in order for me to, to survive and kind of be doing what I need to do to grow my career and my business. But I'm curious, like how much mindset plays in that? Like what have you seen and how can people start baby steps, right? Because it's scary because it's change. So whether it's going to be, change of, maybe potential failure or maybe you will potentially succeed, both are equally scary. But how do you manage that as an individual? Like where, are there some like self-talk that you do to yourself? Like how do we do it?
Well, what's interesting about what you just said is you're so accomplished, and you just said all of that. Like but you answered the question, I think, in your own statement, where you use the phrase baby steps. And that is part of the answer, I think. I think that
Mm-hmm.
might be in the root of the answer. One of the things that we do as advocates and coaches in the work that we do is we work with an individual every single day. And if I have a client, I talk with that client usually multiple times a day, every single day, for the time that I'm working with that client. It's usually a time span of 6 months, 9 months. And I only mention that because in the period of 180 days, if you have somebody else you're accountable to who's walking you through those, as you said so wisely, baby steps, you don't have anywhere to run to not be successful. You have to track toward a goal. And like I said earlier, when you know where you're going, you take those baby steps every day. I have another friend like you who's also an entrepreneur, and she taught me years ago to do something very scary as soon as you can to drive your business forward as early in the day as you possibly can. And I do that, and it's hard. It's not the easiest thing, but I try to do that every single day, and I try to have my clients do that as well. The other secret, and you use that word secret, the other secret, and I don't think it should be a secret, is that I have my clients write every day in something like this. This is just a regular notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And they write every day 4 things, what they absolutely have to do that day. And I'll get back to that in a moment. What they're doing to take care of themselves that day. Then they write down how they feel, everything that they feel: frustrated, lonely, joyful, elated, focused, sharp, grateful. And that leads me to the fourth one. They write down everything that they're grateful for that day. And that helps. You talked about the word mindset. That shifts the mindset. And it's proven by science. Data shows that when you list out everything that you own, everything you feel, you list out everything you're grateful for, it shifts your mindset back to that, okay, here's what I have to do to drive my business or my personal brand or my career forward. This is what I'm doing today. And that should include things that you have to do that day that are obligations. Maybe it's to pay a small bill. Hopefully the bills are small. And then self-care, things that you're doing for yourself. And the most successful people that we work with do this unequivocally every single day. It's the first thing they do. They screenshot it and they send it to us as a text every single day. We know right away if someone's not going to be working really well, if they won't send their notebook entry to us every day. And once in a while so that does shift the mindset to your point. Once in a while, we'll have someone who just sort of, oh, I'll give it to you later, or I didn't do one today, I'm going to do it later. When I tell you that people who are working at some of the biggest companies all around the world, this is the way they start their day. So, if I'm mentoring a younger student or somebody newer in their career, and I say, hey, this is what they're doing, it works, just try it. It takes sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes less. You can take more time if you have it, but it's such an incredible tool to shift the mindset, to focus on exactly where you're going. And so it's so simple. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not some like brand new AI tool. We can maybe turn it into one, but it really works.
It's so powerful because it's so accessible and it's free for anybody to do, and it only takes a few minutes of your day. And I'm totally on board with that. It is something I very much believe in. I think we forget the smartest tool there is out there, well, hopefully for many of us, is our brain, and the power we have to actually restructure our brain and how we approach our day by just bringing awareness. That's what it sounds like what you're talking about. Is like just bringing awareness to certain things before your day gets crazy and wild, and then everything you might have thought about that but you didn't write down and didn't start your day with that, it's just in the back somewhere as baggage at that point, versus at the front of your mindset for that day about like, gratitude. I think is a big thing. I think I love biographies, and when I read biographies, it's like the success is like like you have to be grateful for just grateful for where you are today, what you have today, and no matter how small or big that thing is, or that whatever situation, how good or bad the situation is, just being grateful is a huge, huge thing that I think we forget because we're all trying to find these magic formulas that are, complicated, but it's actually very simple, which is what you just described. I love it.
It's already inside of us, you know.
Exactly.
And then the other thing about that notebook tool is that science also shows us that a lot of our thoughts are repetitive and compulsive. And
Mm.
so when we do what you talked about a few moments ago, like something's hanging around in the background, put it down on paper. If it's important, then you can get it done. If it's not important, let's look at it and be curious about why is this a repetitive and compulsive thought? And that's okay. That's the nature of the mind. The mind is just a tool,
Yeah.
and our brain is a wonderful tool to be able to get things done and think critically and execute. But when we're thinking and the thinking is detrimental, just getting it down on paper and looking at like, okay, what am I doing today? What are these thoughts? What do I absolutely have to do? And it's also delineating between here are things I have control over and here are things I do not, which is also really powerful. And recognizing, oh, I don't have power over these things. I'm not going to put them in my notebook. I'm not going to try to execute on them or control them.
Mm.
I'm going to let it be.
So, and I'm curious, as people kind of participate in this journal writing, and a lot of the people you work with, of course, the high achievers and leaders, are there certain kind of themes that you've seen arise in terms of like limiting beliefs they struggle with? Of like what arises, like what do leaders struggle with? Like because I think we always think they got it figured out, or like high achievers are like, wow, like everybody's aspiring to be in that position and so on. I'm sure they struggle with stuff. Have you seen any themes that people typically struggle with?
I think the one that is talked about so much is, and I hate to even say it, is that imposter syndrome. That is something that I know it's talked about so much on social media, so much in discourse about limiting beliefs, but it's real. It's real. And I continue to be surprised at how many of the world's leaders still have this imposter syndrome. One of the most incredible clients I ever worked with created a proprietary tool, I'll say, because I have to be careful because all of my clients are confidential, and that's really the key to so much of our business. That said, one of these clients created a proprietary software. It's in a league of its own. There's nothing even remotely like this. He created his own company. That company was then purchased by absorbed by a much larger, still private company. And this client couldn't really even believe that his company was purchased. And when I say his company, it was a small little company, but it was the thinking. It was the genius behind what he had created. That was the whole reason that his company was absorbed. And here was this large company that had purchased him. He was absorbed. And then his idea, his software, his intellectual property, let's say, to be more accurate, became the entire purpose of that larger company, their entire reason for being. Every investor meeting around the world he was invited to, and he was part of this whole show. And so working through that imposter syndrome became so important to encourage him and say, it's your idea. Your idea is brilliant. And it's not about, and this is where things get tricky. It's not about you. It's about your creativity, your smarts, your ability to think critically. He was able to create something incredible and bring it to market. And then now it's something just so amazing that the world enjoys. And but to be able to be the almost like the little secret weapon, like you
Mm-hmm.
said in the beginning of the pod, like on his shoulder to say, hey, you did create this. It's real. And I think one of the things that helps to get our minds into that wise and logical mindset is say, hey, you have a business plan for this, or you have a personal brand, or you have the intellectual property. It exists. It's real. It's not something made up. No one can take it away from you. And so to try to encourage the individual to know that you have absolutely everything that it takes to be successful. It's already here. It already exists. That helps so much. But that's one of the main things I see. I think there needs to be a different phrase for that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you there. You know what's another kind of difficult thing that I struggle with, and also I think a lot of people struggle with, is not feeling guilty for taking a break. That is something I still struggle. I'm better at it now, so like I'm better at it. I'm not great at it, but I'm just better. Let's say a little bit better at it. But the guilt that you feel when you, and maybe it's tied to that, the limiting beliefs as well, because like, okay, if I'm not productive this next, 2, 3 days, even though it's a weekend, right? Like you start to feel guilty, and then you just like sitting there thinking about work, and you feel guilty for just relaxing or being at a family outing when you're like, I need to do this and this. And in entrepreneurship there's always something. Like you can work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, like it's never stops. So, and I'm sure when people work with you, I'm sure they fall in, they feel the same way. Like, how do you tackle that?
Well, that's also such a great question, because whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, or you're a leader, or you're an up and coming leader, all of us, we could, just as you say, work 24/7 and never stop. One of the things that, and I just really want all of us to lean into this, because I think this is something I've seen that I think is really, really important that I don't hear people talk about that much, is that the most successful leaders are willing to say no, and they're willing to have like time block. Like I literally have leaders time block, like, okay, from 7 to 8 a.m. I'm doing this, 8 to 9 I'm in this meeting.
Mhm.
But they'll time block out time for themselves. The people who I see, we see this in our practice at High Gear Advisors. We see people who say, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm in back-to-back meetings. And one thing that's a key takeaway that I want everyone to listen to is that real leaders are not back to back. You're the leader of your day. And even
Mhm.
if you're an up and coming leader, even if you're in your first job out of school, if you're in school and you're an intern, even if you're in your first job and you're in high school, if you're the leader of your own life, your own day, you're the author of your own life. So sometimes when I work with somebody who's more in middle management, or more feeling like they're a victim of their day, I ask them to stop and go through their day and author it. That's why that notebook becomes so essential. Yes, you're right. It is a free tool. It's not some sexy like AI new thing, but it's inside you. And I think that's even sexier or more compelling than anything, is that the solution is already inside you. You
Mhm.
don't have to be back to back. If you're a real leader, you are not back to back. You have to have what we call margins between everything. I didn't come to this podcast, frenetic and crazy. I became ready to record this podcast with you, for example, 35 minutes before. I was ready to
Mhm.
go. So I'm calm. I'm not taking calls. I'm not fielding this and that. And like, both of us are very, very busy, but we are the authors of our day, our week, our month, and our life ultimately.
Mhm. What are some habits that you keep like regularly that you swear by personally, maybe professionally, that helps you grow and just stay sane? Because you're in a very high impact role from a perspective of just you're doing a lot of giving. It takes a lot of energy to do what you do, right? Because you're working with other people, and it's a lot of making sure that no matter how you feel, like you have to deliver to your clients. So what are some things that you do that helps you stay in that balance, maybe?
Hmm. That's a great question. And you said something interesting in the question, which is deliver to the clients. I don't ask my clients to do anything that I'm not doing myself. So if I'm asking them to wake up and do a meditation to keep their mind clear and sit down for less than 5 minutes and write out what they're going to do, what they're doing for self-care, their gratitude list, how they feel for that day, how they feel in that moment, I have to do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a leader of integrity. I'm not a founder or an entrepreneur in integrity if I'm not doing the same things. One thing I don't do is I don't go on long extended vacations. The leaders I work with do not go on these long extended things. Even the principals I've worked with who are based in Europe, for example, where it's more socially acceptable to go away for, say, a month tops. The life is structured more so that we have time blocks and margins of space, time for joy, time for connection with friends, with family, time to work out, time to take care of the body, time to take care of yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally. There's actual, and the great spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle calls it clock time. I love that phrase because it really is just clock time that we block out to do the things that matter. Mm-hmm. So if you consider the fact that if you have time built into your day to connect with someone you love, connect with nature, meditate, do something that brings you joy. You don't need to be forced into doing some like, okay, now I'm going to take vacation and I'm going to relax now. You've had time throughout your day where you connect to yourself, your purpose, to others. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
I think it's so practical and I love it. It's been like this whole conversation is just like super practical and I love it's so easy to apply, and I think we all need that reminder, I mean, myself included. I'm curious, what's the best career advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow. One of the best pieces of advice, period, I've ever received. And this, I've shared this before and it wasn't that popular. So I'm just going to, so buckle your seatbelt. My mother shared advice and my grandmother said the same thing. So I guess she got it from her grandma as well. Both of them shared with me, Kristin, everywhere you go, there are going to be people who don't like you. Yeah. And I notice now as my own career as a founder that I get a lot of no. Mm-hmm. And I can't let that phase me. So I would say to people who are younger, people who are mid-career, people even, at what they may think of as their peak of their career, that to take no and take criticism and rejection in stride. It's going to take a lot of no's to get a yes. And one of my clients actually, he's one of my first clients ever. As he started to heal and come into his own, and to come into another chapter of his career, come into another personal chapter for himself. One thing he taught me, and my clients teach me all the time. One thing he taught me is he said, you know what? I'm thinking of myself as like a train in a station, and the train has already left the station. Anyone, and so I say this to my clients as well. Think of yourself as a train, right? You know where you're going, and we talked about that a little earlier. Like aim at something. Okay, where's the train going? So the train has left the station. So if you know the train has left the station, you've got your squad on board. So for me, I have 3 mentors I rely on heavily. I listen to them. They're very practical. They tell me exactly what to do. And then if I don't do it, it's up to me. Yeah. But the train, think of it as a train, your personal brand, you as a leader, wherever you are, and it's leaving the station. There are going to be people who say, no, I don't like you. There are going to be people who say, oh, wait, that train looks great. I like where it's going. I'm going to run. Let me, I have a ticket. Let me jump on board. And it's not everyone's going to come with you. So, that piece of advice I got from my mom, my grandma, like not everyone's going to say yes. Not everyone's going to like you. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're in that train. It's yours. Aim at it. Go in that direction and be unapologetic about it. Really focus and get going.
I love that. I still have, it still hurts. Like I still get little like little pinches. But what's interesting, whenever some people say no, before it used to like crush me, and I would spend days. I'm like, oh my God, like what did I do wrong? And how can I? And like, or I'll go in defense, like who do they think they are? And like, but what about what they're doing? And I went through all of that, and now it's just like it's a little like pinch if somebody says no. It's just like the pain gets less and less as you experience it, and as you become more confident and understanding why you do what you do, and becoming kind of embedded in your own values, and understanding that not everybody's going to align with those values. I think it does take a lot of experience and maturity. I think, but it still stinks for me personally. So I think it's beautiful advice and beautiful reminder. I love that. You've mentioned Eckhart Tolle. Are there any other kind of people that your go-to books you read, authors, or maybe podcasts that you listen to that kind of help you in your own growth as well?
Well, books, podcasts for sure. The this is maybe an opportunity to share that the whole foundation of the method that we use to advocate for an individual is based mainly on Jungian psychology. So it's a bit dry, but it's classical psychology, and it works. And the part of it that's really robust and exciting is that Carl Jung taught to do something called future authoring, self-authoring. And so that's something that we do, and you can do that today. You can do that right now in your imagination, but it's really powerful when you write it down. So the main books that I use in my practice are the works of Carl Jung, the work of Jean Piaget. The work of Jean Piaget talks about how all of us prior to the age of 7 were already formed. You used the word
Mm,
values moments ago, which is such a powerful and important word. Our values are something that we bring into the rest of our lives, and they're usually formed prior to the age of 7. So books, I do always have to go back to the classic books that I use in my practice. Um, I also like a lot of the books by Robert Greene, Eckhart Tolle. Robert Greene wrote the book 48 Laws of Power. Uh,
mhm.
a lot of these classic books about being strategic and logical are incredibly helpful because we are human beings. We're flawed. We get emotional. Those are very, very helpful. In terms of podcasts, um, God, there are just so many. I love listening to yours. Of course, I'm biased. Uh, and I like to listen to I listen to the news every single day. Before we jumped on the podcast, I shared that with you. I try to, this might be a bit of controversial thing to say, but I try not to receive and take in so much. I try to be really careful about what I'm listening to and what I'm reading,
Mhm.
and be really careful about what I'm putting out. So I try to spend more time in silence, if I'm being honest, and reading. I also do read for pleasure. And one of my mentors is an acclaimed author, a recipient of the Booker Prize, and his name is Colin McCann. He's helping me write the book that I'm writing right now. So in order to be a real leader, I think we have to be quiet as well. So that's also profoundly helpful.
It is very, very solid advice. I had a guest on my podcast I think last year, and one of the things he mentioned is he said, just spending 5 minutes in the morning, just sitting down and just in peace, like even 5 minutes, right? Like, because I think for a lot of people, 5 minutes with your own thoughts is too much, unless you're like used to that and meditation and everything like that. But he said just sitting down, not listening to anything, just staring at the wall if you have to. I think that in that silence, we get a lot of those answers that you mentioned in the beginning, like the answers are within us. Like what we need to do is here, but we don't allow with all this noise, we don't allow that to flourish. We don't allow that to come to the surface. So I think it's, again, beautiful, very practical. I love that. Before I ask you my last question, you mentioned that you're releasing a book. So can you tell us more about that and where can people maybe, I don't know if it's coming out this year or next year, but like where can people follow your work? Where can they connect with you, stay in touch, and kind of keep an eye out for that book?
Well, that's a really good question because prior to just only a few weeks ago, our business had no website, took all social media down, and it was called Life in High Gear podcast. We had a 42 episode podcast that was really well listened to and supported on Patreon. And we took the entire thing down and archived that. So that podcast is available if you email us, and you can access it, and we have it all zipped up as a gift. So if you reach out to us, it is available under a membership, right?
Nice.
The podcast we're doing, the second season of the podcast is coming out this spring. So we're really excited about that. So that's the Life in High Gear podcast. To find us, though, our website is called The Higher Gear. So we can put that in the show notes, hopefully. So it's higher, so The Higher Gear. And it has bios on there, testimonials. You can really hear the voices of people who we've worked with. And you can also, which I think is fun, is see companies of, we're trusted by companies and leaders at those companies. So I think that's a lot of fun. You can also email us at hi@thehighergear. So just hi@thehighergear. And as far as the book talks specifically about the tools, some of which I've shared with you here today. And something that you just said in the last topic we touched on, the idea that stillness speaks. And the idea that we need to have more stillness, we need to have structure for our day, structure for our week. It's just so overwhelming when we think about like, this is what I want to do for my life, and these are my goals. So the book really breaks down, here are the tools that leaders have trusted. This is what works. And there are a lot of fun stories in there, lots of juicy little stories about dating, divorce, breakups, marriages. And now in our business, we're starting to have babies being born, which is really cool as part of our community. But yeah, those are some of the things that the book will discuss, tools that you can really implement. And these are things that are proven to work if you use them. You just have to use them. That's the tough one. Yeah.
Beautiful. The last question I ask all of my guests, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
I think the question that people could ask themselves more often is something a little bit scary, which is to sit with yourself, sit alone, maybe in your bedroom, somewhere quiet in your own space, and ask yourself, if I could get out of my own way, what is it that I need to stop doing? And maybe there's a second part of that question. It's all really the same question. What could I start doing? What do I have to start doing that's scary? But the main one, what do I have to stop doing? Right? So for some people, it will be, I need to, stop spending so much time on YouTube. For some people, it might be something even more scary. I know I need to stop drinking. I need to stop being in this relationship that is not reciprocal. I need to end relationships with these people and instead engage with these people who are more a part of where I'm aiming. Some of the answers, another mentor of mine said the answer to that should scare you. It should be an answer that is a bit jarring. That's okay if you're willing to face, these are the things I need to stop doing. Maybe I need to stop spending. Maybe I need to stop shopping so much. Maybe I need to eat better. Maybe but often it's a serious answer. And if it's scary, that's great. It should be scary. You can get help from somebody like me and my team, somebody who can be accountable, a friend, family member, another professional, but you don't have to do things alone. But that answer, just sit with yourself and say, how can I get out of my own way? It should be scary, but that's a great thing to address.
As you asked that question, I'm sitting myself, and I know the answer to my question. They are scary. And then you said scary. I was like, okay, well, it's supposed to be scary.
Okay.
Good. So it is, it's, again, it's very powerful. And I think this is where the work that you do comes in so handy, because it's not that we don't know these things. It's hard to do it. It's hard to keep yourself accountable. It's easy to let every other priority come in the way before you prioritize yourself and what you need to do, which is the thing, again, I'm biased because I'm also in this kind of in the world of coaching, but I think that's where coaches, and I've also have a number of mentors, and I've spent a lot of money on coaches, on all sorts of coaches in my life, and it's always been super beneficial and just the best investment I've ever made in my professional life and personal life, essentially. So yeah, I mean, so really, I admire you for the work that you're doing, and just to be able to, at the same time, just have it all together yourself, like in a sense of just like, being disciplined enough to stay true to what is it that you're preaching, because I think that's also hard. I've definitely failed at it at times, and so it's we're not perfect human beings, but I think it's admirable that just the work that you're doing, and I love it, and hopefully people who are listening can take advantage of that and follow your work and get in touch and definitely listen to that Life in High Gear podcast. It's been a super super interesting conversation to me. I've learned a lot, and it's what I love about my podcast because I learn from my guests, and I'm grateful.
Thank you so, so much for having me. And it definitely shows that you work so much on yourself with such a successful business and your books. It's so, so cool. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kristen.